Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 series, Can We Save the Oakland A's? And we've done a little bit better this season in saving the Oakland A's, ended up with a winning record, and we ended up sneaking into the playoffs with a wild card appearance that we have ahead of us, starting potentially 3 games on the road against Kansas City in a best-of-3 series here today. So the second playoff appearance of our 8 seasons in Oakland is about to get underway. Before we do that, just want to comment on a couple of comments to the past episode. Patrick DeBonis brought up our owner goals, and I think we're not in a bad position. Achieving a winning record this season was an average priority goal. Obviously, we did very well of that. Upgrading at center field was a low priority goal. Luis Lara did decently with that. Increasing fan interest was a very high priority for ownership. And unfortunately, as you can tell by the orange type here, the 5-point increase in our fan interest is not going to be viewed particularly favorably by Mr. Fisher. But I do think the fact that we not just got to a winning record, but made the playoffs and did at least get a decent year out of our center fielder, Luis Lara, will hopefully enable us to get more than the 1-year extension we got last offseason. The attendance goal is another very high priority goal, but that's not due until 2033, actually. We actually exceeded it this year, getting attendance up over 27,000, so good signs there. Next year, we'll need to focus on bringing more of our drafted players to the team and improving a record in extra inning games and, winning a championship next year. But we'll worry about that when we get to next season. Right now, we're going to focus on this season. And at the start of this episode, I have no idea whether we're going to be going on a long playoff run over however long this episode ends up being, or will we have a relatively quick exit from the playoffs and spend some time reviewing our team's performance for this past year. So I'll know by the time this episode is over, but you won't unless you listen to or watch the whole episode. And those of you who do this faithfully and religiously and consistently, do sincerely appreciate that. And even if it's your first time watching one of our videos, appreciate you clicking on us and giving us a chance to deliver some very modest entertainment. But a couple of housekeeping items that actually may turn into pretty significant items before we begin the playoff series against the Royals. Got some interesting thoughts on what to maybe do with Jake Ortega, who's the top prospect in our organization, the number 11 prospect in baseball. Had a really nice year for us in AAA Las Vegas. He was not good when we brought him up in the majors. Weren't expecting much. We're hoping to maybe catch lightning in a bottle. But looking at his ratings, didn't expect him to excel. I probably did expect him to hit better than a $155, but those are the breaks. Back to my original point, though, got some thoughts on what to consider doing with Ortega from a couple of loyal viewers and frequent commenters. Not my four-ply suggested at least shopping Ortega. He brought up a trade that we made with our Buffalo Wings expansion franchise in OOTP 24, where we flipped he was definitely a top 10 prospect. He might have been even higher than that we had picked up in a trade for an even more highly regarded prospect. And he was suggesting that maybe we could do the same type of thing with Jake Ortega. And I think that's a interesting thing that I haven't explored since we've been viewing Ortega as our center fielder of the future and hopefully our maybe number 2 hitter of the future. But there's no harm in exploring those options, so it's something that I thought was an interesting idea to think about. In contrast, Wyme 943 kind of said, hey, Ortega is a pretty important part of the team. Focus on his development and build around him, which is also, I think, very legitimate advice. I don't think it hurts anything to shop Jake Ortega when we get to the end of the season. But the reason I may not end up following Not My Four Ply's advice is that after that really rough start to his major league career, Ortega's demands for a longer term contract have come down a lot. He's talking 8 years and a total of $45 million here. Now, if you remember, we checked in, I believe it was probably about a year and a half ago, game time, and he was looking for around $80 million over 8 years, which wasn't really a significant bargain to what I think he would be set for in realistically in arbitration if he progressed the way that we thought he was. And I can't remember whether I have done it offline or online in subsequent videos, but his price has actually gone up. The last time I checked in, I believe it was about $95 million that he was looking for 8 years. So his demands have come down considerably. Now, I'm guessing it's still in line with what they project for him in arbitration in the coming season, since maybe he's not viewed as positively right now. But there's a part of me that thinks if I wait till the off season to explore what the trade market for Jake Ortega could look like, he could be back to looking for $10 million a year for the next 8 years, which, given that we'd be buying out 3 minimum years as well as some arbitration years, probably isn't a steal. So I think right now I'm actually tempted to try to lock him up through his early 30s for a relatively reasonable amount. The bat certainly needs to develop more for him to be an all-star caliber player. But with that outfield range, with the speed that he has and his base running ability, and the fact that we do think the bat should ultimately at least be acceptable, I think he's certainly a potential player that, at the money he's looking for, particularly given that we can probably get him for a bit less than that over 8 or 9 years, I think I'm going to make an offer to Ortega now. So I like the idea from Not My Four Ply to always be exploring all of the options possible, but particularly with the fact that we're going to get Ortega back into the development lab this year, and we can hopefully make a real cost-effective signing, I'm going to try to get an offer out to him right now to lock him up for 8 or 9 years. The other thing that will do is that will completely eliminate the need for us to think about manipulating his service time at the beginning of next season. If he's ready for the majors, we bring him up. If he's not, we let him sit in AAA and we still pay him a pretty good salary. But there won't be any more playing around with arbitration dates, and we'll just be in a position where we can make the right decision for the organization as far as whether he's ready or not. And we're looking at offering a 9-year deal to Ortega. He says he's looking for $53.2 million over 9 years. We're 47.5, so we're a little less than $6 million off. And we're also trying to be very conservative in the fact that the final 2 years of this contract aren't guaranteed and they're team options. So we'd certainly be paying him more for the next 4 or 5 years than he's scheduled to make. But if he ends up working out, probably would be paying him less than he would command on the open market. And we do have the opportunity to get out of some of those out years if things just don't work out with him. I think we might be a little light on the money, particularly with the 2 team options that we put in, but every penny is going to matter with these Oakland A's. So I'm going to at least see what he thinks about this offer. And he's willing to think about it. So we've got the opportunity to potentially lock Ortega up for a lot less money than it would have taken to lock him up 6-12 months ago. Maybe his ceiling is not as high as we thought it was, but our scout, who is an excellent scout, still thinks that there's a lot of potential for him to improve his bat. So we're going to go ahead and submit this offer to Mr. Ortega. And if he ends up becoming what we think he could become at the top end, this could be a very important contract for the future of Oakland, trying to build a consistent contender. If it doesn't work out and he's not really as good a hitter as we think he could be, it's not a horrible contract for the next few years, but it's likely something that we'll probably have to give up some prospects with to get off our books to a better team 5-6 years down the line if things don't work out with Ortega. But I think it's a risk that we're willing to take. And speaking of risks that I'm willing to take, we may take a real big one here on Kevin Stubblefield. We talked about him a bit in the last episode. Was a guy who has really developed strongly over the last year and a half or so. He was a second-round pick, so he was a pretty highly regarded prospect. But the last couple years, he's become, in my mind, one of the top prospects in our organization, even though I think he's still ranked like 195th or something overall. But put up a 145 WRC plus in AA this year. We promoted him to AAA, where he hit 373 with 5 homers and 18 ribbies and just 59 at-bats. He doesn't bring much of anything to the table defensively. He's a first baseman / awful left fielder. Mostly he's a DH type. He's not a great leader, although he has high adaptability and intelligence, but he's got decent speed, particularly for a first baseman and a left fielder that's not really that good defensively. And he's got really good gap power, and we think that his contact and his home run power could both end up above average with an average eye. So for the offensively challenged Oakland A's that we've had over the 8 years of this playthrough, Stubblefield could be a very interesting player for us. Unfortunately, he sprained his ankle like last mid-August, and that kept him out basically the rest of the AAA season. He healed up with, I think, a handful of games left in the regular season for the A's at the major league level. We didn't bother bringing him up. Quite honestly, we really didn't think of it at the time. So he's completely unproven at the major league level. But as I said, we've got very high scouting accuracy on him. And we also have a scout that is pretty darn good. So I feel pretty comfortable with these projections. And thinking about contract extensions with Stubblefield, he's asking for only $30 million total over 10 years. So if he becomes a above average major league hitter, we've kind of got the opportunity right now to sign him to a similar-ish contract to the one that we signed Tyler Soderstrom to very early in this playthrough, when he was probably a roughly similar age to Stubblefield, maybe a bit older, but certainly not a proven big-time established major leaguer when we signed that contract. And I think in the interest of trying to build something sustainable with these A's and recognizing the reality of the financial situation we're likely to be in, we've had the lowest payroll and the lowest budget in baseball literally for the last 8 seasons with no exceptions, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. If we can lock Stubblefield up and he can become, he doesn't have to be a superstar. At that kind of money, if he becomes a consistent 115 WRC plus kind of guy, that's pretty good value. Even though I admit he doesn't bring much to the table defensively. So similar to what we just did with Ortega, we're going to try to put together a long-term deal for Mr. Stubblefield and see if maybe we can lock up some bats who can be an important part of the A's future here, while we really should be focused on this upcoming series against the Royals. And as I noted, he was looking for $30.1 million over 10 years. We're offering him only $25 million over 10 years, again with a couple of team options at the end. I'm going to at least see what he thinks about this. Again, worried we might be a little light, but we're also giving a guy who's played 15 games in his career above the AA level financial certainty. I don't think these two deals are deals that would cripple the A's, although certainly the money in the out years could be significant in the context of the A's budget if these guys don't work out. But I think with a team that we expect to always have one of the smallest payrolls in baseball, these are the kind of educated, hopefully, gambles that we need to take, because if one of these contracts is okay and the other one ends up being a huge win for the team, that's a big step in the right direction of hopefully building something sustainable here. So again, I think we might be a little light in terms of what we're offering him, but we'll give it a shot. And he's willing to think about it. So offers out to Stubblefield and Ortega to potentially make them two cornerstones that we'll try to build around for the next decade here in Oakland. And with that, I think probably some unexpected business out of the way, it's time to talk about our roster for this playoff series against the Kansas City Royals. And we'll be going with our top three pitchers, Jackson Ferris, Shane Baz, and Chase Burns as our potential starters. Mason Miller's going to move into a righty specialist / setup role. And Jason DeCaro, who was our fourth starter this year and actually our biggest winner with a 15-9 record but a 3.94 ERA, is going to go into a setup role for us. We're going to cut down to 12 players on the pitching staff, although we don't have days off in the series. If we're going through 12 pretty rested pitchers in the course of just 3 games, and we're struggling to put things together in a Game 3 situation, that means we're probably not in a Game 3 situation because we got blasted so horribly in the first couple of games. So even though there's not a potential off day in this wild card series for us, we're still going to go with just 12 pitchers, give us another option, a 14th position player. And our 14th position player is going to be an interesting one. Patrick DeBonis asked in the comments to the last episode whether we had put Jake Ortega onto the 40-man before September 1st. And we actually did do that. I don't always remember to, especially with a team like the A's, since we generally haven't been in playoff contention. But we were in playoff contention this year. So I did want to ensure that if things went well with Mr. Ortega, that he would be eligible for the playoff roster for us. Unfortunately, as we talked about, things didn't really go that well with him, and he hit just a $155, and I don't think he's ready. But I did also put Kevin Stubblefield, who was injured at the time, onto the 40-man roster, figuring that he was going to be with us next year with this profile anyways, so I don't mind getting the clock ticking on his 3 option years a little bit sooner. And although Stubblefield has never faced major league pitching, with our best offensive player, Colt Keith, out unless we make a run to probably the World Series, we are going to be struggling even more to generate some offense. So we are going to not just have Stubblefield on the team, but we're actually going to play him as our first baseman against right-handed pitching. You may ask, well, he's a righty. Why don't you have him in the in the lineup against left-handed pitching? A very legitimate question. Felt like we had more veterans in that lineup, and also looking at the Kansas City pitching staff for this series, they're going to be throwing 3 righties at us. So not something that I really needed to think too much about. If they do end up changing things up and we have a lefty on the mound against us, we'll have Stubblefield off the bench potentially to maybe pinch hit for somebody in a critical situation. So he's certainly not going to make up, I don't think, for the loss of Colt Keith, who had a monster season for us. Led the league with 128 ribbies. Probably would have led the league in home runs if he hadn't fractured that thumb with a couple weeks left in the season, and led the league in slugging percentage, although the batting average dipped to 288. But he was a strong contender for the MVP. I think he'll end up coming a little short, but certainly missing the last couple months of the season, or the last couple weeks of the season. I don't want to overestimate things here. Doesn't help him on that front, but a huge hole in the middle of our offense by losing Mr. Keith, and we are, for better or worse, going to try to fill that hole with a player who has never faced major league pitching in his life. Desperate times call for desperate measures. So taking a look at the playoff tree here in 2031, the Yankees and the Astros, 2 bitter rivals over the last almost decade of Major League Baseball at this point, are the teams with the byes in the American League. The Blue Jays will be facing off against the Orioles, and our A's, of course, will be facing off against the Royals. Our series, A's versus Royals, will be a rematch of our ALDS series from 2 years ago, when we had home field advantage on the wild card. Royals took 3 straight to win the division series on our way to that shocking World Series championship. Over in the National League, the defending World Series champion Cubs and the Rockies have the byes. The Cardinals and the Marlins will be facing off in one wild card series. The Marlins already up 1-0 in that series. And the Dodgers and the Mets facing off in the other wild card series, where the Mets have taken a 1-0 lead. Taking a look at this series for us, we were an 85-win team, wild card. The Royals 88-74 won the AL Central, so 3 games better than us, although we took the season series from them. Both teams are pitching focused. We were first in the AL in runs against, while the Royals were third. They were middle of the pack, ranking 8th in runs scored. We ended up near the bottom of the pack, 13th in the American League in runs scored, and again, certainly losing Colt Keith, who accounted for a very significant portion of our offense, makes me think that scoring runs here in the postseason is going to be a challenge. But we will find out shortly whether we're up to that challenge. We've got our ace, Jackson Ferris, on the mound, 14-5, 2.90 ERA. Missed a few starts towards the end of the year with an injury, but he's ready to go right now, and he's on normal rest. Going up against Steve Tudor, a 15-8 record for Refund Tudor, 22-year-old, led the AL with a 2.69 ERA, almost 69% quality starts, a 56 fit minus, and a brilliant 7.9 WAR. I tend to think Mr. Tudor may be celebrating a Cy Young Award about a month and a half from now. He was the sixth pick in the draft in 2027. So he certainly has worked out well for Kansas City, and we've got a tough matchup for us today against the righty who looks like he's one of the top young pitchers in all of baseball. And Kansas City does get a one-run victory on us. Bobby Witt Jr. with the lone homer in the game. Kansas City with a 4-3 victory. We jumped out to a 2-0 lead. They tied it up in the fourth. We took a lead in the fifth and then 2 runs in the sixth, including a 2-run home run by Bobby Witt Jr. Provided them with the margin of victory. Witt Jr., a big game for them. Couple of hits and 3 of their 4 runs batted in. Lara, DeLauder, and Sajasi with the ribbies for us. Stubblefield does go 1 for 4 with a run scored in his first major league experience here in the playoffs. Did leave 3 runners on base. Ferris, not great, but not horrible. Gave up only 5 hits and didn't walk anybody over 6 innings. Struck out 11, but the hits were timely as he gave up 4 earned runs, including the home run to Bobby Witt Jr. that clinched the victory for or at least the margin of victory for the Royals. Tudor was injured while pitching, day-to-day with a sprained ankle, so won't be critical likely to Kansas City's chances of success if they get by us. He had a quality start for the Royals, although he did allow 10 batters in 6 innings, but he kind of scattered the damage a little better than Ferris did, unfortunately for us. So the beauty, but also the pain of these wild card series is that they can be over incredibly quickly, and being down here 1-0 means our backs are proverbially up against the wall. So we're going to have to go perfect the rest of the way and win these next 2 games to move on from Kansas City and get a chance of maybe having a home game or 2 in a potential divisional series matchup. Shane Baz on the mound today for Oakland. He was a 1-year rental that we picked up on the free agent market in February, coming off of a lost season in 2030, and he actually hadn't pitched in the majors in a year and a half due to injuries. The 9-10 record was not exceptional, but a 3.81 ERA, 1.23 WHIP, 2.1 WAR ended up being a pretty important starter for us, even though he is unlikely to be back with us next year, as he's looking for 4 years, $17.5 million a season. So we'll be one and done here in Oakland. Hopefully it won't be one and done for Baz in the playoffs this year. Ben Kudrna on the mound for the Royals. 10-10 record this year with a 3.88 ERA. Led the AL in wins 2 consecutive years before this year. But his ERA was better this season than it had been in the years when he was putting up those bigger win totals. So another good pitching matchup here. Can we put a little pressure on the Royals and send things to a game 3? Or will the season end today for the Oakland A's? And another 1-run game, but we get the victory 2-1. Trevor McGill, who we picked up as a rental, gets the win in relief. Soderstrom and Rincon, homers for Oakland. Roman Anthony, the homer for Kansas City. So all 3 of the runs in the game by virtue of homers. Royals took a 1-0 lead. Rincon with a solo homer in the top of the 9th to tie it up. And then, of course, the solo home run from Soderstrom in the top of the 10th to give us the ultimate winning margin here. Baz with a real nice outing and some good relief from Vesia and McGill as we get the victory. Pat Wade did not do a good job relieving the starter. Only gave up 3 hits and 1 walk over 8 innings. and then Wade blew things for him. So we've got a shot. We did what we needed to do. Obviously, would help our potential ability to come back next year, and it would help our potential ability to have a budget that we're happy with next year if we can have some home playoff games. And the only way we're going to have any home playoff games is if we win this deciding game 3 today. Take a quick look at the playoff tree here. The Orioles have already moved on to face the Yankees. The Cardinals have already moved on to face the Cubs. The Mets have already moved on to face the Rockies. We've got one game left against the Royals to see whether we'll have the opportunity to face off against our division rival Houston Astros in the ALDS. Chase Burns on the mound for Oakland, made the trade for him last offseason. He was 8-6 with a 3.46 ERA as a starter for us this year. Put up a 3 WAR, certainly a respectable starter. Doesn't give up a ton of hits, but he did walk a sickly 90 batters in 161 and a third innings. So that's the potential concern with Mr. Burns on our side. On the Kansas City side, Corbin Burns on the mound for them, 15-7 with a 3.48 ERA for the veteran, 4.1 WAR. Looks like a pretty typical, strong Corbin Burns season. Doesn't have the stuff that perhaps he used to, but unlike our Mr. Burns, his control is still pretty good. So another good pitching matchup here in game number 3 of the American League Wild Card Series, and we'll find out whether the season ends today for Oakland or do we move on to face a divisional rival. And the Oakland A's, a shocking win, coming back from being down 1-0 in the series to take the last 2 games in Kansas City. Royals fans won't be happy about that. Our old nemesis Joe Edwards hit a home run, but we got home runs from our rental Royce Lewis and 2 more from Soderstrom. He is the series MVP. Taking a look at the box score, traded runs in the bottom of the first and the top of the second, but Kansas City with 2 in the bottom of the third took a 3-1 lead. But after that, it was all A's. 3 runs in the fifth, run-scoring double from Rincon and a 2-run single from Lara. Added runs in the 6th and 7th, and then really broke things open in the 9th with the 3-run home run from Royce Lewis. So Soderstrom with the 3 homers is the series most valuable player. And kudos to frequent commenter Holdor on suggesting that Soderstrom might end up having a big playoff series for us, filling in for Colt Keith. He certainly did in this series against Kansas City. Quite honestly, Stubblefield with another couple hits today also hit .333 for the series. So for a guy with no major league experience whatsoever, he also helped out. We emptied out the bullpen today. Burns got the W, 3 earned runs over 5 innings. And then we proceeded to use 6 other guys to get the final 12 outs of the game. But they only allowed 3 hits and 2 walks along the way. So it was pretty solid relief over those final 4 innings. But our manager was able to mix and match with the depth of our bullpen. And our A's are on to the American League Division Series. So we're going to have a lot of division rivals meeting each other here in the Division Series here in 2031. The Yankees will host the Orioles. The Astros will host our A's. The Cubs will host the Cardinals, and they're already down 1-0 in that series. And then in the only series that doesn't have divisional foes, the Mets from the NL West or the NL East will be going up against the NL West winning Colorado Rockies, and the Rockies already have a 1-0 lead in that series. And given that Stubblefield hit so well in the small sample size of the first 3 games of his major league career, we did find a way to get him into the lineup against left-handed pitching. Took out Denzel Clark, who's really was a injury call-up for us in September. He is our second most competent defensive center fielder, which is kind of why he's on this playoff roster, but happy to give the opportunity to the youngster rather than the veteran Clark here in the ALDS. And unfortunately, with the fact we only had a day off between the series, we're going to have to get creative with our pitching staff. We were hoping to add either Mason Miller or Jason DeCaro into the rotation, but both of those guys pitched when we emptied out our bullpen 2 days ago, so they're not quite at 100%, even though they didn't throw a ton of pitches for us. And we'd rather go with someone who's fully rested for game number 1. So Joe Rock, who has been an all-star each of the last 2 years as a lefty working primarily out of our bullpen, gets the big game 1 start for us. Not a great year for him, a 4-10 record with a 4 ERA, even though, as I noted, he was named to the all-star team for a second consecutive year. But if we get through, well, we will get through game number 1, and then it'll be Ferris, Boz, and Burns all on normal or extra rest with the fact that we've got an off day in a couple of days. So the goal is to win one of these 2 games in Houston and put a little bit of pressure on the Astros. Taking a look at the matchups here, as we talked about, they were the division champions, beat us by 4 games. They took 10 out of the 19 games during the season against us, so better record, and they also won the season series. And on paper, they're a better team than us, although obviously we had the best pitching staff in the AL in terms of runs allowed. They had a very good pitching staff that was tied for 4th in runs allowed, and they were 4th in the American League in runs scored, scored 100 more runs than we did this year, so would expect the offense from the Astros to potentially be a problem for our pitching staff here. Definitely going to be strength against strength with our pitching against their offense. So we'll see what happens in game 1. We've got the veteran lefty Joe Rock on the mound going up against Tariq Skubal, 3-time All-Star. 12-7 with a 3.95 ERA this year for the left-hander for the Astros. So a couple of southpaws on the mound in game number 1. And Oakland with a 1-run victory. Rock out pitches Skubal, save to McGill. Taking a look at the box score, we scored runs in the 2nd and 3rd. They came back with a run in the 4th and only 1 hit on the day. That run-scoring double for Herrera off of Rock was the only hit that the Oakland pitching staff allowed. So potentially incredible game for the Oakland A's, but it's a W. Skubal was good, but Rock, Miller, DeCaro, and McGill were better, allowing just 1 run over 9 innings. Now they did allow 6 or 7 walks, so it certainly wasn't perfect, but it was more than good enough. A couple of hits for Stubblefield, LeBron 3 for 4 with a ribby, and the other run driven in by Drake Baldwin, looks like likely on a sacrifice of some sort. So speaking just completely pragmatically, obviously we'd love to continue this run going with 3 straight playoff victories and have this team make it all the way into a unexpected ALCS this year. But the nice thing about winning this first game is that it guarantees that we get at least 2 home dates. Although I guess it doesn't guarantee that we get 2 home dates, because if we win the next two games, then we'll be moving on to the ALCS. But certainly we'll get at least a couple of home dates in the ALCS. So I guess, yes, technically winning this first game guarantees that we have at least two playoff games in Oakland this year, which on the margin will help us financially. So we will move forward to the next day, continuing to do some scouting of our players as our new scout gets up to speed, and he's pretty good on just about everyone in our organization at this point. Jackson Ferris on the mound for us. The lefty is our ace. Alan Hunsaker on the mound for the Astros. Split the year between Cincinnati and Houston. The Astros were able to trade for him. He was a combined 6-17 with an ERA of over 6 across the two stops. But 25-year-old has a pretty interesting profile. I guess that third pitch, his cutter, is not exceptional. He hasn't had a great season. He looks like he might be a guy with a big future ahead of him, but seems like a guy that we might be able to score a few runs off. Nope, I couldn't have been more wrong. We didn't score a single run off of him. The Astros beat us 3-0. Ferris with another loss. Hunsaker with the W. Both teams had only 5 hits today, so there's been some good pitching in this series. Lewis Soderstrom, pinch hit from Jorge. Etakawa and Rincon with the hits for Oakland. With the exception of Arakawa, they were all singles. Ferris was a quality start. He got burned by some errors. Might have been his own error or possibly Chase DeLauder's that cost us the runs there. But only 1 earned run over 6 innings. But the 2 unearned runs certainly cost us. And we will be heading to Houston tied 1-1. So the pivotal game number 3, tied up 1-1, will at least be here in Oakland. Cody Bradford, left-hander on the mound for the Astros, 13-7 with a 3.78 ERA, an AL best 254 BABIP against him. And on the mound for us, Shane Baz, who we've already talked about, a one-year wonder for the Oakland A's. And that one-year wonder delivered here in a 5-1 victory in game number 2. The only home run, or the only run for Houston, was a solo shot by Dylan Beavers. No home runs for Oakland today, but runs in the 1st, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th to open up a 5-0 lead, and then gave up the solo homer in the 9th. But 14 hits for Oakland, so the offense was strong. Everyone had at least 1 hit today, which is really nice to see. Stubblefield still hitting .348 across the playoffs, only driven in 1 run, but still has been helpful to us. Baz, 3 hits, 3 walks, and 9 strikeouts over 5 2/3 innings. Miller and Romano. Miller with good work out of the pen. Romano with work out of the pen, but we got the W, and we are now just 1 win away from a completely unexpected trip to the ALCS. And it's taking a while to move forward here. I'm guessing we're going to hear about some retirements. Oh, actually, we hear about our contracts, and both Stubblefield and Ortega have signed those extensions. I don't even know if they're extensions. They're just contracts before they're either established major leaguers. The fans pleased that Ortega's on board, so as a prominent draft pick, he's pretty popular. Doesn't actually move fan interest for us, unfortunately. But getting those 2 guys hopefully locked up for the medium to long term could be a very huge day in terms of the future of this organization. We've got guys who are potentially cornerstones to build around offensively, and in the case of Ortega, a little bit defensively as well. And now we're going to try to make the day even better by beating the Astros to get into the ALCS. Spencer Arrighetti on the mound for the Astros, 17-8 with a 3.82 ERA. So a pretty strong year for him, although the WAR was only 1.5. Did give up a decent amount of homers. And Chase Burns on the mound here in game number 4 for the A's. And the A's are going to the ALCS. Boy, this team has been really good when we make it into the playoffs. And Kevin Stubblefield, who just signed that extension with us, has never actually had a official major league at bat since he's made his debut in these playoffs. Just won an American League Division Series Most Valuable Player Award. Hit the first home run of his major league career today. Burns with the win, Arrighetti with the L, McGill with the save. Taking a look at the box score, 2 in the third. They chipped back with a run in the 6th. We extended the lead. They chipped back with a run in the 8th. But we did what we needed to do. And Stubblefield, 3 for 4 today, including the solo home run. Burns with an excellent start. And then Vesia, Miller, and McGill combined to allow just 1 hit over the final 3 innings of action. And these A's are somehow heading to the American League Championship Series. And perhaps even most shocking, all of the other series are still going on. Both of the NL series are tied 2-2. I guess the Orioles and the Yankees are actually playing today, and it's a little bit unrealistic because we're out in Oakland. So I am guessing that, maybe the A's were disrespected so much as a West Coast team, and they had us play an afternoon game in Oakland, and they put the Yankees and the Orioles in prime time today. I guess that's what happened, or at least what we'll tell ourselves happened. But I think typically in OOTP, when you're in a divisional series, your team plays the game before you know the results of the other series, regardless of the geographies involved. But hopefully the Yankees win here, and that series goes on a little longer, and we're able to get a little bit of rest and set our rotation up the way that we'd like it for, as I said, a completely shocking appearance in the ALCS. And I don't want to get ahead of ourselves too much here, but Colt Keith, only a week to go with that fractured thumb. If the Yankees series goes to 5 games. Actually, I don't know if that's even going to change when the series will start, but if we've got a few days until the ALCS begins, I think there might be an argument to put Keith onto the roster and acknowledge that he's not going to be playing the first few games of the series, but hope that the series goes long enough for him to have an impact when we're back in Oakland. And the Yankees did win game number 4 against the Orioles, so they'll be going back to New York for a decisive game number 5, while our A's shockingly get some rest. And the Yankees did end up coming back to hold off the Orioles. So the best team in the American League in the Yankees, and the best team in the National League in the Mets and the Cubs both got through their series. The wild card teams, the Mets and the A's, are also still alive, so would assume that the Yankees and the Cubs are going to be big favorites in their respective league championship series. Certainly the fans of New York are hoping for a Subway Series here in 2031, more than 3 decades since the last one. And as we get ready to start this ALCS, Keith still 5 days away from being able to recover from that fractured thumb. So, best case scenario, he misses the first 4 games of this series, but he could be available for the last 3. Given that we don't have Denzel Clark in our lineup anywhere, I'm kind of inclined to send him down and bring Keith onto the roster. Clark has played in 3 games, presumably as a defensive substitute or a pinch runner, but he doesn't have a single at-bat. So he hasn't been incredibly important to us. I think I am inclined to take Mr. Clark off of the roster and put Colt Keith onto it. If you've got thoughts on the topic, would love to hear them in the comments to this episode, because as you may have surmised by that last statement I just made, and the fact that if you're watching this episode, you're very close to the end of the time for it, we are going to move on and play the ALCS tomorrow in our next episode. It's been a great run with these A's. I am going to at least give some thought to what I'm going to do, but right now, unless many viewers strongly convince me that it's completely stupid, I do intend to take Denzel Clark off of the playoff roster and put Colt Keith on it. Hope he doesn't have any setback with that fractured thumb, but hope that we can at least win one of the first 4 games against the Yankees and then have our top offensive player back on board for potentially games 5, 6, and 7 of the series. Maybe joining our new top offensive player, Kevin Stubblefield, who overall through these playoffs has been pretty darn good. 11 for 27, a double, a home run, 173 WRC plus. You can see he must have been healthy at the end of Las Vegas's run in the playoffs, I guess, because he did play 2 games for them when he came back from the injury. So he did have a little bit of playoff experience in his career, but certainly not at the major league level since he's making his major league debut here in the playoffs for us. But an unexpectedly long run through these playoffs for the Oakland A's, and we will see if the almost unbelievable magic can continue in the ALCS in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.